Years before the Titan submersible made that fatal dive to the Titanic, an employee of OceanGate raised concerns about the vessel. Raising those concerns, he says, led to him being fired and getting sued by the company. David Lochridge hasn't spoken out publicly until now, at the US Coast Guard hearing into the Titan's implosion.
Stockton had no experience building submersible. None of them did. Hands down, I would never go in that thing.
Less than 2 hours into its journey to the wreck of the Titanic, the Titan submersible lost contact.
On June 18th, it was reported missing in the Atlantic with 5 people on board.
Bolted inside a submersible the size of a van with less than 2 days of oxygen left.
The debris is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel.
All 5 people on board died in the implosion. And in the time since, a lot of questions have been raised about OceanGate's practices with the Titan, many of which are being asked at the Coast Guard's hearings. This isn't a criminal trial. There are no legal arguments being made, no cross-examinations. Think of this as a fact-finding mission to try and understand what went wrong and how to prevent it from happening again.
Yes, you're taking a risk going down a submersible, but don't take risks that are unnecessary with faulty, and I mean faulty, deficient equipment.
David Lochridge was the director of marine operations, responsible for safety. He worked for OceanGate from 2015 to 2018. From a lack of oversight to questionable materials to construction itself, Lochridge laid bare his concerns about the safety of the Titan and why he says it was a disaster waiting to happen. Let's go through his testimony.
I wanted to go to Titanic, you know, it was on my bucket list. I wanted to dive this, but to dive it safely.
When Lochridge first arrived, OceanGate had been collaborating with engineers at the Applied Physics Laboratory, APL, at the University of Washington. Lochridge says he was told they would be heavily involved in the design, construction, and helping class the Titan vessel.
Having the university involved, it gave this. It was confidence in what was going ahead. To have that collaboration, and it was a collaboration, I felt good about it.
The Titan was considered an experimental vessel, a new construction, unregulated and in development. And it's why having the expertise as well as the checks and balances of the university made sense.
With a university involved, you do ask questions, you try and find answers. It's public versus private. It's general knowledge versus applied application here for commercial benefit.
Now, OceanGate's partnership with the Applied Physics Lab was called into question when the submersible first went missing in 2023. The university was quick to distance themselves from the project, calling into question just what their role was.
Whether they were dropped or they dropped themselves, I think that ultimately the university, their own risk management would have come along, and their own scientists working and engineers on this would have said, this design seems to have a fatal flaw within it.
But according to his testimony, Lochridge said the concerns raised by APL engineers were dismissed, and OceanGate cut ties with the lab.
They did not want APL to do anything else with regards to the design concept and the build of Titan. They were going to do it all themselves.
Do you know why they made that decision?
Can I say arrogance? Thinking they could do this on their own without proper engineering support. I mean proper engineering support.
He says the decision was made by CEO Stockton Rush to now do all engineering in-house.
I think that was mostly a time thing in his head. As I said, he could be very impatient.
And almost immediately, Lochridge says he started to raise concerns.
From the engineering team, I mean, I spoke to every single one of them, all these children that were coming in straight out of university. Some hadn't even been to university yet.
That lack of experience made Lochridge uneasy, and he started putting it on the record.
I maybe came across as the troublemaker within the organisation because I was so outspoken on any issues, you know, in terms of my confidence in the inexperienced engineering team.
Constructing a vessel to dive 3,800 meters isn't easy. Vessels that go to that depth are meticulously designed and engineered. It takes years. But the point, according to Lochridge, was to get to the Titanic as quickly and cheaply as possible.
Cost cutting, bad engineering decisions, the desire to get to the Titanic as quickly as they could to start making profit, a lot of steps along the way were missed.
I think it was General MacArthur said, "You're remembered for the rules you break." And, I've broken some rules to make this. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did.
The hull is arguably the most important part of a submersible. It's the protective outer shell.
The pressure hull is the material that protects the humans and stands between them and the immense pressures, 380 times atmospheric pressures, that they're going to be subjected to as they go down to the bottom of the ocean.
And according to Lochridge, this is where the Titan really deviated from tradition. Most submersible hulls are made of titanium or steel because they can withstand the intense pressure changes at great depths.
We have a long, long history of understanding how that kind of metal responds to stress and responds to these cycles of compression and expansion.
But titanium is heavy and hard to maneuver, so the Titan team decided to go with a carbon fiber hull made up of layers and layers held together with a resin. Now, carbon fiber is really strong, but when under extreme pressure, something called fatigue sets in, and it starts to weaken.
You do have these layers, and they do delaminate, and they delaminate in water, particularly in this case with external pressure on the Titan versus the internal. This is extreme 4,000 meters underwater pressure that's in excess of 400 times greater than surface. As this goes to the bottom, you get water that can penetrate and get inside of the fiber wrapping.
And while that may not happen the first or second or even the fifth time the vessel goes down, every time it descends to those depths, those fibers are weakening.
It's rigid, 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 and then it breaks. And so that lack of indication that it's at the breaking point is a problem because we have no warning when it's getting near the breaking point.
Which is exactly what Lochridge says he was afraid of.
When the hull came in, I could see all the imperfections on it. This is one of the samples that I was given by the engineering director, which came from these cut-off sections. And please look at the state of it. There was so many delaminations, so many voids. It was like porous paper. It was disgusting.
Experts say carbon fiber hasn't been pressure tested at these extreme depths on a submersible before, so it's impossible to know just how many times it might be able to descend before breaking down.
Nobody knew what the loading was going to be on this. No computer is going to be able to tell you with those components.
Between the dives, after multiple 20-some dives successful, well, it just took that last dive for it to fall apart. And that's what carbon fiber does.
Now, the vessel did have an acoustic monitoring device, basically mics attached to the sub listening for signs those fibers were buckling or breaking. And according to Lochridge's testimony, OceanGate felt a pilot would be able to hear that breaking and still have enough time to get back to the surface. He quoted what Rush said to him during his private dismissal meeting in 2018.
It doesn't just implode, it screams like a mother before it implodes. Now, for the CEO to say that in front of other people, right, regarding that carbon fiber, I'm putting that on the record.
And according to multiple experts, it's likely this breaking was the cause of the implosion. It's widely reported that the Titan had gone to the Titanic at least 10 times previously. And on each dive, that carbon fiber would have weakened.
The Titan imploded, and it imploded most likely due to delamination of a carbon fiber hull. So, yeah, I think that's the number one problem we are talking about here in this particular event.
I looked at everything, and there wasn't anything, and I mean anything, on that build that gave me any confidence in them producing an efficient product. Nothing.
According to Lochridge, the Titan was riddled with workarounds and faults. Take the O-ring, for example. It's a type of mechanical gasket, and under pressure, it creates an airtight seal between two separate pieces. The problem with the O-rings on the Titan when Lochridge saw it is that the grooves the rings go in weren't standard. And in this image from Lochridge's report, you can see there's a gap that Lochridge says shouldn't be there.
I have dealt with God knows how many O-ring grooves throughout my career. That is wrong.
And the list of problems just kept piling up throughout Lochridge's testimony. He brought up the issue of the viewport, the window at the front of the vessel. It was made of acrylic, 9 inches thick. Under extreme pressure, though, that acrylic could start to shrink and shift, making the Titan vulnerable.
The viewport manufacturer states that the viewport is only good for about 1,000 meters.
Nowhere close to the Titanic, which sits at nearly 4,000 meters.
We're talking 400 plus times the pressure at the Titanic. So why wouldn't you test it at the depth it's applicable to? Then how can you put paying people on board and go to 4,000 meters? It just doesn't make any sense.
These kinds of practices, according to Lochridge, extended to almost every part of the build.
They reused these domes, they reused these ceiling faces, they reused the acrylic, they reused the interior. Everything was reused.
According to Lochridge, they used an old shop vac hose in the ballast system, critical for buoyancy, a CO2 scrubber system which clears carbon dioxide from the submersible while maintaining the atmosphere, built using a household plastic storage bin and a computer fan. It's not clear which of these particular components made it to the final version of the Titan vessel when it imploded, but Lochridge says what he witnessed is indicative that every step of the way, OceanGate cut corners.
I don't know whether it was a financial thing. It had to dive that year. I mean, that was the intention. There was clients lined up for 2018. They were booked.
Lochridge says he voiced his concerns repeatedly, and that he was ignored and shut down every time, and finally dismissed from his job in 2018. He was put under whistleblower protection, and eventually served with a lawsuit from OceanGate, accusing him of fraud and misappropriation of trade secrets. There's still several more days of testimony ahead from many more witnesses, including former OceanGate employees, directors, and U.S. Coast Guard officials.